don't know about you, but has it ever puzzled you? What do the Conservatives conserve? I'm going to look at a little bit from Edmund Burke, one of the philosophers many a conservative would quote, for the basis of what conservatism is all about. But just before I do that, and I don't want to make this a long video, let's just think about that. The Conservative Party, or to give it its correct title, the Conservative and Unionist Party. The Unionist Party. That means in union with the Protestant minority in Belfast, in union with the Democratic Unionist Party, previously known as the Ulster Unionists, in union as well as maybe in conservation with the likes of the Reverend Ian Paisley's son and heir. So conservative in a political sense, but let's just look again, conservative in a perhaps non-political sense. Who are they conserving for? Well, just generally reading through some of the stuff that Burke has written on, I just looked it up on Google, it's straightforward, just Google Edmund Burke, okay? Who do they conserve for? Well, it seems to be for future generations, according to Burke. Burke is writing that we need to take great care of the Earth's resources so that they can be passed on to future generations. By resources, I'm assuming he means, food, land, water, air, materials, the fruits of the earth, literally, coal, oil, minerals, so that they can be passed along to future generations. Burke also has there a bit of an idea of what I would describe as a slightly Christian belief, a slightly Christian idea of what you speak to Christians about this. They'll talk about stewardship of the future of the earth, stewardship of the planet, looking after the planet, looking after life on earth, actually taking that as far as to the husbandry of animals, the creation of life, the circumstances in which life can flourish, okay? So there's a little bit just to begin with. But I just really want to address this, and I want to maybe just before I quote something from Burke, because I've got a few things on paper here. Forgive me when I do read this stuff, because it's actually quite small. I just photocopied it off and it didn't come out very big, so I'm going to have to look through a magnifying glass so you'll see me looking away from the camera, okay? But I just want to stick with this thought for a moment. This idea of conserving for future generations. What does that mean in practice? Well, one thing that it means is the conservation of wealth, the product of the earth, the conservation of the product of the earth in the hands of a few. I don't know quite how accurate this statistic is, but I read that apparently 1,300 billionaires, just get that figure in perspective, 1,300 billionaires own the natural resources of the world. 96% of those natural resources are owned by 1,300 billionaires. Perhaps conservatives think that they're the stewards. They're the stewards of creation. God has given them the job of steward of creation. God has given them, the guys in charge of Amazon, Tim Smith, lords and ladies, billionaires. God has given them stewardship over the fruits of creation, and it's up to them to manage them. Yet perhaps that's what conservatives are about, conserving. Conserving for the few, conserving in the hands of the few, conserving in the property and investment portfolios of the few, conserving for the greater good or the great and good, conserving for royalty. Look, before I go on, let me just try and read you something here from Edmund Burke, okay? I'll give you Burke's dates because everybody here now seems to think that history is all a matter of dates. That's what Tories are going on about. So, dear old Edmund Burke lived from 1729 to 1797, 18th century political philosopher. Here, he says, the great error of our nation is not to know where to stop, not to be satisfied with any reasonable acquirement, not to compound with our condition, but to lose all we have gained by an insatiable pursuit after more. Just listen to that. But to lose all we have gained by an insatiable pursuit after more. Wow! Doesn't that kind of sum up conservatives? Well, maybe it sums up what conservatism is meant to be about in kind of a good light. Yeah? I think possibly what Burke is saying there, in a sense, is don't be greedy. Yeah, I know that sounds really odd, because obviously when you compare that to what I think conservatism is all about, I actually think Burke is saying there, don't be greedy. Don't just want more and more and more and more. Don't just acquire and keep more and more. Bigger tracts of land, bigger empire, bigger business, bigger control over the lives of ordinary people. I think perhaps Burke is saying, don't do that. Because in the end, your greed will be insatiable. You will never be able to satisfy that greed. You will never be happy through that greed. What I would say now is conservatism is all about greed. It's all about acquisition. It's all about I'm all right, Jack, pull up the ladder. It's all about my heart is insured through private health insurance. And if I have another heart attack, I have paid in money to have this heart cared for and possibly restarted. So if I have a heart attack, I damn well demand that somebody is here in 15 seconds to restart my heart. Because I paid for that. And you peasants haven't paid for anything. So why should you get a free heart start at my expense? I know it's beginning to ramble on a bit, and I don't want to go particularly into the political philosophy behind this, because obviously, if any of you, by the way, are out there and you are studying political thought, get yourself into a decent intellectual debate with somebody who calls themselves a conservative. Find out what they do know about Edmund Burke. Ask them what they think about that quote. Quote socialist philosophers to them. I'd also, of course, if you're a socialist, I'd particularly encourage you, obviously, to read some Marx. I'd probably say look at the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Certainly Mill. Mill is a libertarian, certainly. Look at Essay on Liberty, that's well worth looking at. Yeah? Look at concepts like the greatest good for the greatest number and things like that. And understand, get a philosophical understanding of the kind of nature of what power is. Personally, I think the average conservative today would agree with Machiavelli in The Prince. Machiavelli, famous for saying, the end justifies the means. Oh my gosh, yes, wouldn't Teresa the Appeaser Wouldn't Theresa May really agree with the end justifies the means? Oh yeah, the end justify the means. Yeah, anything as long as I get what I want. Racism to get votes. Racism to save my position as Prime Minister. Racism to keep the Tories in power. Racist Brexit. Racist state. Racism and anything, even hostility to people who are legitimately allowed to be in this country. Let's create a hostile climate towards them, because if we do that, people are going to think, I'm all for British people and I'm not having those jolly foreigners taking our jobs, and Brexit's going to go through and they're all going to go back home. So I ask you, next time you spot a Conservative, ask them, debate with them, quote Burke to them. Ask them not just what is it they're conserving, much more importantly, for whom are they conserving that particular thing or object or wealth or money or power? Whose hands will that which is conserved remain in? Who will continue hanging on to that which has been conserved? Good question. If you happen to be studying political thought or whatever, please, 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 I would love to talk with you. Still got some of my old books, by the way. So, not that I'm offering to sell them, but I still have got some, and I would love to chat with you. Take care. Bye.